Welcome to the Man Cave Podcast with Dan Casper.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to this episode of the Man Cave Podcast, brought to you by our good friends from Hy-Vee and Toyson Ford. On this episode of the podcast, first off, Brandon Berg's going to be joining me, and we're going to talk some top 5 head coach quarterback duos of all time, our top 5 lists. Then in the second half of the episode, we're going to talk some Packers, Lions, keys to victory, and key matchups in this big-time NFC North battle. But let's first bring in Brandon. We are selecting for our top 5 plus, but there's no plus because I don't think you said you don't have an honorable mention.
I didn't do any honorable mentions.
I'm not doing an honorable mention either. Teased it for a little bit. Top 5 quarterback head coaching duos, NFL, Super Bowl era-ish, give or take a couple years if you want to go like a couple years before or something like that.
I didn't for mine.
Okay. Super Bowl era quarterbacks, top 5 quarterback head coach. Not offensive coordinator, not quarterback coach, head coach over here. So, let's get at it. My list is correct.
Okay.
It is the exact one that we should all have. So,
I want to see how close I am to being right.
That's a perfect way to put it, Brandon. So we'll let you go first. Who do you have at number 5?
For number 5, I've got Ben Roethlisberger and Mike Tomlin.
Okay, you're already wrong. Coming out of the gate.
There's a lot of longevity there. They won a Super Bowl together, like Mike Tomlin's record. I mean,
cool.
Yeah.
Really, Ben Roethlisberger and Mike Tomlin?
Yep.
Okay,
I value longevity.
They won one. They went to a
couple. They did.
They went to a couple. They lost to maybe another.
They did. Possibility,
coach, quarterback duo over there. Just kind of throwing that one out there. So, my number 5 one, I'm going because when I think about this, there's actually a little bit of a theme with some of my quarterbacks and head coaches here, where maybe there was some thoughts that quarterback couldn't amount to anything, and then got tagged with the right coach, and boom. So when I think of a quarterback head coach relationship, one of the very first ones I think of, Favre and Holmgren. Favre is not Favre without Holmgren. And I think if Holmgren would have stayed instead of going to Seattle, Green Bay would have at least another Super Bowl. Holmgren should be in the Hall of Fame in my opinion. I know he just made a finalist list. Favre, Holmgren, number 5 head coach. Because those two paired together, that worked. It was perfect blending right there. Favre's not Favre without Holmgren. So, Favre and Holmgren, number 5. Number 4, Brandon.
Number 4, you mentioned the pairing. Obviously, this is the modern blueprint, Mahomes and Reed.
Okay. Yeah.
I mean, the thing with this one is they could be a lot higher in a few years. It's just that this is still active, so I can't,
Yep. That was my 4, too.
Hey,
we got one.
Look at me. I'm not terrible wrong all the time.
I mean, come on. Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes, for crying out loud. This is where I said mostly because I know Patrick was a first-round pick. But I don't think Patrick Mahomes, if he went to the Bears, he doesn't have Super Bowl championships. Right. Again, the pairing, Andy Reid adapting, and really, those two are meshing incredibly well. So Patrick Mahomes, Andy Reid, you are exactly right, is number 4 on this list. Number 3.
Terry Bradshaw, Chuck Noll.
Okay. Straight up just because they got 4 Super Bowls?
That's a big part of it, but obviously those Steelers teams were loaded. Mm-hmm. But you still need the steady hand at quarterback. And I think sometimes people do overlook Terry Bradshaw for what he was able to do as quarterback. Mm-hmm. And I just think that your quarterback is always kind of no matter what, he's front and center of your franchise.
Insert the Duck Commander, Phil Robertson, though. Do they still win, though? I'm just going with the whole college. Okay, so that's your number 3?
Yes.
My number 3, and this is the one I maybe saw 1 or 2 people tell me. Bart Starr and Vince Lombardi is number 3. And why people keep forgetting that one, I have no idea why.
Fair.
Because Bart Starr was like a 17th round pick, whatever the heck he was, had to work his way up. Here's the thing, too. We have to remember, Starr called the plays, except for the first few that were the what do they call it now? Scripted plays.
Yeah.
Other than that, Starr had to get on the same page with Lombardi with the game plan and all that and call those plays. Starr, Lombardi is, to me, the perfect quarterback head coach combo of all time. Starr would not have had a job, would not have been a Pro Football Hall of Famer, would not have been having his number retired or anything like that if it wasn't being paired up with Lombardi, who gave him a chance. And those two were attached at the hip in terms of the offensive game plan and what to call Starr, Lombardi, number 3. That's the one that just bugs me that nobody is saying.
You make a very good case for it.
So, number 2.
Number 2, and this one is a lot of it is influenced too. Joe Montana, Bill Walsh. Mm-hmm. I mean, Bill Walsh is the father of the West Coast offense. Mm-hmm. Obviously, others were able to build upon it, but that group, that combination, to me is very powerful. Mm-hmm. Like, and it set up the success that came afterwards with Steve Young and et cetera. But that combo was they worked in sync.
I think you and I are going to have the same top 2 because it is Joe Montana and Bill Walsh at number 2, as you said. The West Coast offense, again, it's going into a theme here. Montana was not a high draft pick. Montana, coming out of Notre Dame, was he 6th round, I think, or some later on in the draft? Was he the most talented quarterback, like physically talented quarterback? No, he wasn't the most physical. He doesn't have the biggest arm, but though, yeah, you talk about 2 guys in sync and running Bill Walsh under the Paul Brown tutelage, West Coast offense. That's the perfect when you think quarterback head coach combos, they're right there. Offensive minded head coach with your quarterback, bada bing, bada boom, right there. Mm-hmm. We might as well say the number 1 is
Leslie Frazier and Christian Ponder.
Yeah. I was actually going to say Brad Childress and Brett Favre.
There we go. No, Tom Brady, Bill Belichick.
Yeah. That one, come on.
Yeah, right, exactly.
And I know it's Belichick, defensive-minded head coach, Brady over there too, but the championships, the Super Bowl appearances.
Well, and you look at how many different offensive figureheads kind of cycled through in that era.
Right.
And, the constants were Brady, Belichick.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. 1 year it's Chris Hogan being your top receiver.
Troy Brown, Jabbar Gaffney.
These guys. And then
later on,
Randy Moss.
Later on, you do get the Rob Gronkowskis and the,
Mm-hmm. Right. So, yeah, to me, it is, I don't think there's a big debate on there.
Right.
There's one that a lot of people sent me that neither you or I had, and it was Jim Kelly and Marv Levy. I get it for Super Bowl appearances and over there and that style of offense and that.
The K-gun, yeah.
That, to me, I don't see that as, and I don't know if people are just picking it because of the Super Bowl appearances on there. But when I think about head coach quarterback duos attached to that, I don't think of Kelly and Marv Levy.
Yeah, and there were some other ones I was thinking of, but because it's like, well, what about Peyton Manning and Tony Dungy? They weren't together.
Got a few there too.
They weren't together that long,
right?
They weren't together. They were very successful. I think Tony Dungy won at least 10 games every year he was with the Colts.
I almost put Peyton Manning and Tom Moore more.
That would be that would be one, yeah.
Yeah.
But Don Shula, Dan Marino,
mm-hmm.
there was a lot of success there. Obviously they never got over the hump.
Right.
Yeah. I think this was just an idea you came up because you just wanted to slight my guy Joe Gibbs. Why is Joe Gibbs being punished for using several quarterbacks?
Somebody did pick Joe Gibbs and Theismann, but I think that tells you, again, more about Joe Gibbs as a coach to have those different quarterbacks and win 3 Super Bowls, for crying out loud.
Yep.
So, all right, well, that's our latest. So we got 2 different ones. You were 3 out of 5.
The 3 I got that you had that we had in the same spot.
We did.
Our 3 and our 5 were different.
Yep. You're exactly right. So, not too far off. Some people had 4 out of the 5 correct ones there.
Nobody had Starr and Lombardi.
I think I saw one person pick Starr and Lombardi on their list, and I'm like, what are we doing?
You make a very good case for it. You do.
Mm-hmm. That's Starr isn't Starr without Lombardi, but Lombardi needed a quarterback to call his offense because, sorry, that's it's not hand signals on the sideline or calling them in back then. So
the big cards.
Yep.
Hold up the big card that has a picture of a donut and a 17 and a.
They had to have their meetings.
Chevy Tahoe on it or something.
They had to have their meetings. They had scripted plays, but then after that, it was Starr calling the plays, trying to be in Lombardi's head. Read the book, David Moranis, When Pride Still Mattered. Lombardi had to teach Starr, and whatever was in Lombardi's brain, he had to put it in Starr's brain. That, to me, is a head coach and quarterback combo. Quick break, and we're going to talk some Packers-Lions after these quick words. Family owned and operated, Toyson Ford is proud to serve the drivers of the Chippewa Valley with some of the most popular vehicles around Wisconsin and the country. They're committed to giving drivers from across the area the best in customer service with a top-notch selection of brand new vehicles to choose from, as well as an extensive inventory of pre-owned crossover, SUV, and trucks. Plus, with their expert finance, service, and part centers in-house, they strive to be your one-stop dealership for all of your automotive needs. Visit them today at 1000 Chippewa Crossing Boulevard in Chippewa Falls. You may think it's impossible to save some money with your grocery bill and at the gas pump all at the same time. But with Hy-Vee and Eau Claire, it's not. Take advantage of the great deals and the savings at Hy-Vee and Eau Claire while also earning money at the gas pump with Hy-Vee Perks. And don't forget, Hy-Vee and Eau Claire is your tailgating headquarters. Whether you're looking for food, beverages, or apparel to represent your favorite team, including your high school, Hy-Vee and Eau Claire has you covered. Tailgate this season with Hy-Vee in Eau Claire. Sunday afternoon. Hasn't been a whole lot of these games. This is just the third Packers game that has not been played at noon so far. I'm okay with that. I like my noon Sunday games. But 3:25 kickoff for Sunday. Let's do our key matchups and our keys to victory for this game. Let's start with the offense for the Lions here. Okay, we know they're pretty darn good units when it comes to a lot of different things. But before we get to some of the team numbers here, let's take a look at some of the individual accolades or what some of these individual offensive players are kind of doing here for the Lions right now. Jared Goff, to me, is an MVP candidate. When you look at what he's been able to do so far this year, is it eye-popping? I mean, is he setting records or anything like that, in terms of like most yardages and most touchdowns and that? No, not necessarily, but he's 74.1% completion percentage. He's got just under 1,700 yards passing. He's thrown for 13 touchdowns, 4 interceptions. He's got a quarterback rating right now of a 115.3. Jahmyr Gibbs, 591 yards on the ground, 6 touchdowns for him. But David Montgomery, it's kind of a two-headed backfield there. He's got 415 yards on the ground with 7 touchdowns. Jahmyr Gibbs averages 6.4 yards per carry, for crying out loud. And Montgomery, 4.5. We're very familiar with Amon-Ra St. Brown, who's got 408 receiving yards on the season with 5 touchdowns. Packers will not be going up against Jamison Williams in this game, but Sam Laporta, the talented tight end, second-year tight end out of Iowa, also on here. He's third on the team in receiving yards. And offensive line, we know this is a very good unit when it comes to the Detroit Lions. When you look at some of the names on there, I mean, they've invested in the offensive line over the years. Guys are getting paid over there now too, but it is a very talented unit, something that they have worked on over the last few years, and it's looking pretty darn good so far for the Lions right now. So Jared Goff, though, has been sacked 17 times this year. So that put it in comparison here a little bit. If we combine Jordan Love and Malik Willis, they've been sacked a total of 12 times this year. So Goff, you can get a little bit after him there too. We'll get to that here in just a little bit here. But offensively, if we look at the numbers, if we kind of break it down, the Lions and Green Bay are pretty darn similar or really close to each other in terms of averages so far with offense. So when we look at yards per game, okay, Green Bay averages the 5th most yards per game in all the NFL, and all across the NFL with 388. Detroit's 6th, so they're right behind them, 385. Okay, passing yards per game break it down a little bit more, Green Bay in the top 10, 2, 4, 6. They're 8th, 231 point yards per game through the air. Detroit, 10th in the league, 228.4 yards per game. Rushing, again, very similar. Green Bay averages the 5th most rushing yards per game with 156.9. Detroit, right behind them, 156. 156.7. So you're literally talking 0.2 of a difference. Here's one. I mean, it's a fairly sizable difference. The number 1 scoring team in the NFL, that would be the Detroit Lions. 33.4 points per game. 33.4 points per game. Number 1. Comparison's sake, Green Bay, they're in the top 10 in points per game. 2, 4. They're 6th highest at 27 points per game. When you look at the Lions and the results that they played, so they began the season, if you remember, overtime win against the Rams, 26-20. Their lone loss this season came in week 2 against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I want to get to that game here in a little bit too, but that was a 20-16 loss. They defeated Arizona 20-13, and that was back on September 22nd. And since then, it's like their offense has been in a little bit more of a groove in terms of putting up some big points and putting up some big numbers here, because it kind of started off week 4 against Seattle, 42-29 victory. Dallas demolished them 47-9. Squeaked out a victory against Minnesota a couple weeks ago, 31-29, and then Tennessee 52-14. And I know it wasn't just all straight up offense and such, but they've been putting up. They've been playing some really good offense in the last few weeks here, really. And I know, when you box score, that's why we say don't box score scout that Titans game this last week, because you're seeing, 52 points, in that thing. Break it down here, a little bit. Kind of take a look at it. A lot of special team stuff. I know Raymond had a 90-yard punt return over there too. But Jared Goff just 12 of 15 for 85 yards, 3 touchdown passes in that game. Gibbs did carry the ball 11 times and 127 yards in that game. Mason Rudolph also throwing a couple picks to help out the Lions over there too. So, but defensively, let's take a look at where these teams kind of match up with each other. So in terms of yards allowed per game defensively, okay? Green Bay is about middle of the pack, no pun intended, in the NFL in terms of yards allowed per game, 327.4. Detroit does give up, on average, more yards per game, 349.4. If we break it down in terms of passing and rushing, passing yards, Green Bay, again, little middle of the pack, I would say maybe just outside the top half of the league there. But in terms of passing yards per game, the Packers give up an average of 215.8 through the air. Detroit is one of the bottom 2, 4, 6 teams in the league, 247.6. I'm going to get back to that in a second, though. But through the air, Detroit giving up 247.6. When we look at rushing yards allowed per game, Detroit is a top 5 team. In fact, they're the 5th best team in the league, 101.9 yards per game on the ground. Green Bay is a top 10 team. In fact, the 10th, 111.6. Points per game allowed, Detroit's top 10. They just give up 19.1 points per game. Green Bay outside the top 10 just a little bit, 21.3 points per game. So while we look at those averages and we kind of compare it to the rest of the league here, I want to go back to some of the defensive numbers when it comes to the Lions here. So we look at, the yards given up through the air. 247.6. To me, that doesn't tell the whole story. That's why, again, we don't box score scout all the time. Because I think you have to look at the situation involved in some of these games. A lot of these teams playing from behind against Detroit's, trying to make up ground, trying to get back into the game. They're throwing the ball a little bit more. They're trying to play a little catch up. They're trying to keep pace with the Lions. So while you look at it, and it's like, man, maybe there's some opportunities there in the passing game against Detroit because, well, rankings say they give up, the sixth most per game. Don't necessarily always look at that because a lot of times you've got teams that are trying to get back into the game, trying to keep pace with Detroit and their offense, so they're throwing a little bit more compared to what they're rushing the ball against Detroit. So, key matchups, keys to victory for me in this game. And I'm for this I'm going to operate under the assumption that Jordan Love is going to play in this game. I'm going to operate that. I'm going to assume Jordan Love's going to play in this game. He returned to practice on Thursday. I'm going to go with the assumption that he's going to be there. He's going to practice with that. So when we get to this, I want to start with the Packers defense first. And I want to go back to the Lions' lone loss of the season against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers week 2. What happened in that game? What happened in that game where Tampa Bay was able to go to Detroit and pick up a victory? Jared Goff threw for over 300 yards in that game, but he didn't throw any touchdown passes, and he had 2 picks. Tampa Bay won the turnover battle in that game. Baker did throw a pick in that game. Baker, though, just was 12 of 19 for $185 in that game. In fact, Baker Mayfield led the team in rushing, 5 carries for 34 yards against the Lions. Bucky Irving was just 22 yards. Rachaad White had 10 carries, led the team in carries, but just had 18. So how in the world did Tampa Bay get this? Well, they were able to get a couple turnovers off of Jared Goff, right? They were able to get a couple turnovers off of him. They were able to get 10 quarterback hits against him. They didn't have any sacks against Jared Goff, but they were able to put a little bit of pressure on him and get 10 total quarterback hits off of him. Still providing a little pressure, but the main thing, too, they kept Detroit out of the end zone. They kept him out of the end zone. It was essentially a field goal game all day for Detroit. You can call it a little bend, don't break, whatever you want to say, but they kept Detroit out of the game. Detroit won the time of possession battle in that game. Nearly 34 minutes. Practically double the yardages offensively. Detroit had 463 total yards compared to Tampa Bay's 216. They had 26 first downs compared to Tampa Bay's 14. And 1 more turnover than what Tampa Bay had. In fact, Detroit ran 83 total plays compared to Tampa Bay's 47. You look at all that and you take away the score, and you're probably thinking, man, Detroit had to have dominated that game. But you look at the red zone, too. Detroit was just 1 of 7 in the red zone. 1 of 7 in their red zone attempts. Tampa Bay did a fantastic job at keeping the Lions out of the end zone, making it a field goal game for them. So, for me, a couple of keys to victory for the Packers in this game. One is to get that pressure on Jared Goff, especially if it's going to be wet conditions, slippery or anything like that. If that pass rush, it's going to be tough. I understand it. Offensive line for the Lions and that. But that defensive front, and the thing is they got to get home with 4 or 5 guys. They got to provide some pressure. Not necessarily rack up the sacks. 8 sacks would be awesome. But just to get that pressure, hit Jared Goff, rack up those quarterback hits, make him a little bit nervous in that backfield, make him a little bit nervous in the pocket, make him, maybe half a second overthink it or just get a little bit nervous back there. Provide that constant pressure, very similar to what the Packers did against C.J. Stroud. That's what I want to see. I want to see this defense get after Jared Goff like they were able to with C.J. Stroud. Pressure, pressure, pressure. Hopefully it leads to some sacks, but just getting pressure on him, especially if the secondary for the Packers is not going to have Jair and Evan Williams. If Jair and Evan Williams are not in this game, Packers have to be able to provide that extra pressure and get home. That's the thing, too. With no Jair and Evan Williams, you don't necessarily want to bring extra blitzers because you may want them in the back end to help with your coverage. I mean, you're missing 2 of your best defenders in the secondary. So you may not want to bring 6, 7 blitzers, whatever the case may be, because you want to leave them back there. You got to get home with your front 4 with 5. You've got to provide that pressure with those guys. It's going to be tough going up against Detroit's line, but they've got to find a way to do it. They got to find a way to do it to help out that secondary. And Jeff Hafley, I'm curious to see the game plan. Does he try to confuse Jared Goff? Jared Goff, he's good play action. He'll do a little play action there. How does he confuse Jared Goff? How does he, maybe take an extra second to try to figure out things and try to diagnose things? Does he have a pre-look and then as soon as the ball snapped, it changes? There was a really good podcast a couple of years ago from The Athletic, and it talked about these coaching, the family of like McVay and Shanahan and LaFleur and that, and they talked about when Jared Goff was with the Rams and why it necessarily didn't work with McVay and Goff, even though they went to a Super Bowl. But one of the things was within that particular offense, when Jared Goff, like a defense would show something, then when Jared Goff would turn his back, after the snap and maybe hand it off a little bit there, defenses then would switch it, and it would kind of confuse Jared Goff at that point. And I know that's a few years ago, and Jared Goff now is pretty darn good at play action, but can they confuse him here a little bit? Can they give him a pre-snap look and then change it? Confuse it, trick him, that sort of thing. Not having Jameis Williams in this game, especially if the conditions are a little bit slippery, that's a benefit for Green Bay's defense. There's no question about it. But you still got a guy like Amon-Ra St. Brown who can take over a game. You still have Sam Laporta, who is a pretty darn good tight end. And if Javon Bullard is going to be a guy that's going to be moved to safety because Evan Williams is not in this game, who's going to be that guy that's going to be tasked to try to slow down Sam Laporta? Is it going to be a linebacker? Is it going to be Quay Walker? We saw Edgerrin Cooper, running down the seam and such, but I don't know. I might want Edgerrin Cooper to maybe try to get after the quarterback and use his speed over there too. What's going to be the rotation out of the linebackers in this game? Because the linebackers, especially when you got Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery, you better bring your lunch pail. You better bring your lunch bucket because these linebackers, Walker, McDuffie, Cooper, Wilson, they have got, especially if the conditions are rough, they have got to stop this run from Gibbs and Montgomery. They have got to slow them down. Jared Goff is having a fantastic year. He's having a really good year, but it still starts with stopping Gibbs and Montgomery. And I think they got to take a little bit of that playbook from Tampa Bay too. Not only with the pressures of getting after Jared Goff, keeping them out of the end zone. Make it a field goal game. If the Lions are driving, make it a field goal game. Don't let them get in that end zone. Don't get in a shootout with the Lions. And try to win that turnover battle too. Put that pressure on Goff to see if he'll make some mistakes and throw some interceptions. Get after him and try to take away as many possessions as possible if you're the Packers defense. Offensively, for the Pack, again, I'm going to operate under the assumption that Jordan Love is playing in this game. Aiden Hutchinson is an incredibly huge loss for Detroit. And, you know, when you look at this defense, though, too, they're a defense right now that they could take the ball over, too. Brian Branch, second-year man, third-year man, second-year man. That dude's having a solid season here, too. He's a guy that plays like a veteran in that back end. Him and Kirby Joseph back there. Kind of some ball-hawking safeties back there. Jordan Love has to pay attention to where Kirby Joseph and Brian Branch are lined up. They will confuse you. I will go back to, I think it was the Dallas game. Brian Branch, first of all, he's a playmaker back there. Back end, up front, physical there too. But that dude did a fantastic job of baiting Dak Prescott in a red zone pass play. Jordan Love, Malik Willis, whoever is quarterback, you have to pay attention to where these two safeties are going to be, where they're going to be lined up. These two safeties combined have 9 interceptions. 9 interceptions among them. Of the 10 that this Lions team has, 9 are from their two safeties. Pay attention to where those two guys are at. They will try to confuse you. They will try to, bait you into things and making some stupid decisions, especially with, if it is Jordan Love, we know what's been an issue with him so far this year. It's been throwing some interceptions. It's been thrown into some tight coverages. Can't do that against Joseph and Brian Branch because they'll burn you. They will get after you. Pay attention to where they are at all times. Take care of the football if you're Jordan Love, Packers offense. Do not give extra possessions to Detroit. Time of possession. Keep them on the sideline. Keep Jared Goff. Keep Jahmyr Gibbs. Keep Montgomery. Keep St. Brown on the sidelines. 6, 7, 8-minute drives. But the key here, if you get to that red zone, come away with touchdowns. We want to force the Lions into a field goal game, but when it comes to the Packers offense, got to flip it around. Got to get some touchdowns in this thing. Can't get stuck into a field goal game with them. Have those long, sustaining drives, but come away with touchdowns. And if that weather is going to be a little slippery, still pound it and ground it with Josh Jacobs. Get the play action going. Have success running the football, picking up 4, 5 yards per carry. Winning on first down, to me, is going to be huge, too, for Green Bay. Winning on first down, winning on those early downs, getting into third and short, third and manageable situations. Talking like 3rd and 2, 3rd and 3. Don't get into your 3rd and longs. Win early on those downs. And for all that is love and Mary, no stupid penalties on the offensive line. No stupid penalties on the offense. No false starts. No holding. That takes away big plays. That takes away any of the momentum. This offense at times this year has held themselves back because of stupid mistakes or stupid penalties. Don't do that. I know it's easier said than done, but don't do that. Don't put your offense, don't put your team in a bigger hole in a matchup like this. You may have to play as close to perfect football as you possibly can against this Lions team that's coming in with boatloads of confidence, one of the best teams in the National Football League, probably right now the best team in the NFC. Don't make stupid mistakes against them, and don't give them extra possessions on the offensive side. And really quick, going back to the defensive side here for the Packers, going back to that pressure of Jared Goff, I don't know how bad his ankle injury is. I know he rolled it in practice. He was a full participant on Thursday, though. But if it is bothering him a little bit, and maybe you got some wet fields or wet conditions over there, again, depending on what it's like, test it. You know, the Lions are going to test it if Jordan Love's out there with his groin injury. But I think overall, you're going to have to try to play some darn near perfect football. That defensive line for the Packers is going to have to play some darn near perfect football. Those linebackers, darn near perfect football. Some of the best games that they've played in their lives, some of the best games that they have played this season. No question about it. No penalties. Limit those, or I know it's asking a lot to have no penalties. Limit the penalties, especially in big situations. Third down, if you're on defense and you force them out, don't have a stupid penalty that keeps the drive going. Play fundamentally sound football. Win up front. Win in the trenches. Win on the defensive line if you're the Packers. Win on the offensive line if you're the Packers. Open up those running lanes for Josh Jacobs. Provide protection for your quarterback. Part of me wonders, I don't think this will happen, but part of me wonders, because I think it would tip it away here a little bit. But let's say the field is a little wet. Say conditions are a little bit out there. Does that actually benefit having somebody like Malik Willis out there because of his running skills? Now, I don't know if you can necessarily put him in and split reps with with Jordan Love, because, you know, if Malik comes in, it kind of maybe tips the hand of what you're going to do. Now that's going to be up to Matt LaFleur to kind of keep things guessing. What's the game plan going to be? How are you going to be able to move that ball? This is a big-time game for Jeff Hafley, too, especially for not having Jair Alexander and Evan Williams. Let's see his secondary background come into play in this one. He's a secondary coach by trade. Let's see how he can game plan it and call this game going up against the Lions offense with two of his three best defenders not in that game, not counting Xavier McKinney. But no Jair and no Evan Williams. This is a big test for Jeff Hafley in his first year as defensive coordinator for the Pack. And let's see that secondary background maybe kind of come to play here a little bit. Players that I think have to have themselves a game. Have to go out there and have themselves a game. Defensively, I want Kenny Clark. I want Kenny Clark to be that guy that is just wrecking that offensive line against the Lions. Stopping the run, stopping Gibbs and Montgomery up front, providing some instant pressure on Jared Goff, getting into his face. I want to see Kenny Clark have one of these games. You know, another guy I'd probably throw in there is reigning NFC Defensive Player of the Week, Edgerrin Cooper. Why not? Get him more snaps, see what he can do. He's been a guy, linebacker, that we have seen have success rushing the quarterback, getting out in pass defense. I think he's one of the more pure, I think he's probably the most pure linebacker that they've got. Maybe the best tackling linebacker, too. I'd say Edgerrin Cooper is my next man up for defense we kind of have to count on him, or this is a guy that's really got to have himself a game. And, you know, you can make the case, too. If it is, I'm going to throw, I'm kind of cheating here because I said to only have one. I'm going to throw Javon Bullard into this one, too. Because if he is out there at safety, Evan Williams is playing some really good ball. Let's see Javon Bullard step it up now and fill in that role. He's a second-round pick, okay? Let's see him go have a great game. And then you can pick the corners over there, too. But for me, I'm going to start with Kenny Clark. It starts up in the trenches, help out your secondary, dominate the line of scrimmage. Offensively, it'd be easy to say Josh Jacobs, and you'd be right. Josh Jacobs, no doubt about it. Especially, again, conditions, control the clock. time of possession, picking up 4 or 5 yards per carry. Josh Jacobs is an easy one. Is an easy one. Especially if, well, regardless if Love plays or not. He's not going to be 100%. So how do you help them out? How do you help out your quarterback, whether it's your backup or whether it's Jordan Love? Have success running the football. And it starts with Josh Jacobs. My second one, though, I think I might go Tucker Kraft. Because if they are going to be running the ball quite a bit, the dude has displayed how well of a blocking tight end he is, but also how effective he is in the receiving game. You know, I could see it where if they have success running the football or they're very focused on running the football, it's where Tucker Kraft is going to have, I think, some opportunities on some play actions where he's going to be in line blocking and then kind of leaks out. And you got an opportunity for Tucker Kraft. So I'm going Jacobs. To me, that's the easy one. Next up, though, would be Tucker Kraft behind that. All right, that is going to do it for us on this episode of the Man Cave Podcast. Until next time, I'm Dan Casper, and I will talk to you on the next episode of the Man Cave Podcast.